The first thing you need to understand is that I didn't apply for this job. Nobody applies for a job at a place like Edgemore Furniture Liquidation. You end up there. The way you end up sleeping in your car for a week, or eating peanut butter with your fingers because you sold your silverware. You arrive at a place like Edgemore the same way a leaf arrives at the bottom of a storm drain, not by choice, but because everything else pushed you downhill until there was nowhere left to go. I'd been out of steady work for almost 5 months when my uncle called. He managed a string of liquidation outlets across the rural stretches of eastern Ohio, the kind of stores that buy up the unsold inventory from companies that go bankrupt and sell it at a steep discount in towns that can't afford anything better. Dented refrigerators. Couches with small tears in the fabric. Dining sets missing one chair. Everything was damaged in some small way, but still functional. Still usable. That was the entire business model. Take what's broken just enough that no one else wants it, and find someone desperate enough to call it good enough. He told me the Edgemore location needed a night manager. The previous one had left without notice, and the store had been running short-staffed for weeks. He said it was simple: receive deliveries that came after hours, run inventory, keep the place clean, and lock up at midnight. The pay was low, but the rent on the apartment above the store was lower, and he'd take it out of my check so I wouldn't even have to think about it. I could start immediately. I drove down on a Sunday. Edgemore is one of those towns that sits between two larger towns and serves as a reason to not stop driving. There's a gas station, a post office inside a hardware store, and a church with a digital sign out front that only ever displays the time in the wrong time zone. The liquidation store was at the far end of what generously could be called the commercial district, a long, flat-roofed building that used to be a farm supply warehouse. The parking lot was cracked and uneven, with weeds growing through every seam in the asphalt. The sign above the door read Edgemore Furniture Liquidation in faded red letters, and below that, in smaller text that had been added later, open 7 days, 10 a.m. to midnight. My uncle met me at the front entrance. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him, and he had a nervous energy about him that I attributed to too much coffee and too many stores to worry about. He walked me through the building quickly, pointing out the loading dock in the back, the inventory room, the registers, and the narrow staircase that led up to the apartment. The sales floor was enormous, easily 10,000 square feet, arranged in long rows of furniture that created a kind of maze. Bedroom sets flowed into living room displays, which bled into kitchen tables, which gave way to office furniture. The fluorescent lights above cast everything in a flat, sterile white, and because there were no windows on the sales floor, you could never tell what time it was once you were deep enough inside. He handed me a set of keys, one for the front door, one for the back, and a smaller one he said was for the utility closet, and a single sheet of paper with the nightly procedures typed out. I expected the usual things: check the locks, set the alarm, turn off the lights. Most of it was exactly that. But a few of the items gave me pause. Number 6 said, do not rearrange any furniture on the sales floor after 9 p.m. If you notice that furniture has moved, do not correct it. Leave it as it is. Number 9 said, if a customer is still in the store at 11:45 p.m., do not ask them to leave. Simply announce that the store will be closing in 15 minutes and proceed to the back office. Wait there until midnight. And number 11, the last item on the list, said, if the front door is open when you arrive for your shift and you did not open it, do not enter. Call this number. Then it listed a phone number with a local area code. I asked my uncle about these. He barely looked at the paper. He said the building was old and the floors were uneven, so furniture sometimes shifted on its own. It wasn't worth fixing every time. He said some of the late-night customers were odd, the way people in small towns sometimes are, and it was better not to confront anyone. And the door thing, he said, was just a precaution because the locks were unreliable and it might mean someone had broken in. Standard stuff, he told me. Nothing to worry about. Then he left, and I was alone in the building for the first time. The apartment upstairs was small but clean. One bedroom, a kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower stall and no tub. The previous tenant had left nothing behind except a faint smell of cigarette smoke and a Bible on the nightstand with several pages torn out. I unpacked my bag, made the bed with sheets I'd brought from home, and sat on the edge of the mattress listening to the building settle around me. Old structures make noise. I knew that. But there was something beneath the ordinary creaks and pops, a low, almost subliminal hum that seemed to come from the floor itself, from deep in the bones of the building. I told myself it was the HVAC system or the refrigerators in the break room below. I told myself a lot of things in those first few days. The first week was uneventful in the way that a slow drip is uneventful. Nothing dramatic happened, but there was a constant, low-grade sense of wrongness that I couldn't pin to anything specific. The daytime staff was small, just 3 people. There was Patty, a woman in her 60s who ran the register and never made eye contact with me for longer than a second. There was Dale, who handled deliveries and stocking and spoke mostly in grunts and nods. And there was a younger guy named Marcus who had only been there a few weeks longer than me and seemed perpetually on the verge of quitting. He was the only one who talked to me like a normal person. On my 4th day, I asked Marcus why the previous night manager had left. He was hauling a dresser out of the back of a truck, and he stopped mid-lift and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as careful. He said the guy's name was Terrence. He said Terrence had worked the night shift for almost 2 years without a problem, and then one week he started calling in during his shifts, saying he kept hearing someone walking through the store after he'd confirmed it was empty. He said Terrence put in a camera, his own, personal camera, not a company one, pointed at the main aisle and let it record overnight. Marcus didn't know what Terrence saw on that footage. But the next day, Terrence drove to the nearest town with a bus station, left his car in the parking lot with the keys in the ignition, and took a Greyhound to somewhere in Virginia. He didn't pick up his last paycheck. He didn't come back for his things. Marcus said Patty boxed up what was left in the apartment and put it in the dumpster, and nobody talked about it after that. I laughed, because I wanted it to be a joke. Marcus didn't laugh. He just finished moving the dresser and walked away. That night, I paid closer attention. My shift officially started at 6 in the evening, though I was already in the building most of the time since I lived upstairs. From 6 to 10, there were usually a handful of customers, people stopping in after work, couples looking for cheap furniture for a new apartment, the occasional person who seemed to be there just to get out of the cold. After 10, traffic dropped to almost nothing. By 11, I was typically alone. It was during the quiet stretch, around 10:30 on a Wednesday, that I first noticed the furniture had moved. I'd walked the floor at 9, the way I always did, straightening price tags and picking up the odd piece of trash. I knew the layout well by then. I'd memorized it almost without meaning to, the way you memorize the furniture arrangement in your own home. The green sectional was near the entrance. The oak dining set was in the center of row 3. The row of recliners lined the back wall. I knew where everything was. But when I walked the floor again at 10:30, the oak dining set was gone from row 3. I found it at the end of row 7, pushed against the far wall, with all 4 chairs tucked neatly beneath the table. It hadn't been sold, the price tag was still on it. It hadn't been moved by Dale or Marcus, they'd both left at 5. No customers had been in the store for at least 40 minutes. I stood there looking at it for a long time. Then I remembered the rule. Do not rearrange any furniture on the sales floor after 9 p.m. If you notice that furniture has moved, do not correct it. Leave it as it is. So I left it. I went back to the front counter and sat on the stool behind the register and tried to read a book and tried not to think about how a 300-pound dining set had moved 60 feet across a concrete floor without making a sound. The next morning, the dining set was back in its original spot. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know what I would say. The furniture moved by itself didn't seem like the kind of thing you could report without sounding like you'd lost your mind. And there was a part of me, the rational part, the part that still wanted this to be a normal job in a normal building, that refused to accept what I'd seen. I started telling myself that I'd been wrong about where the dining set had been in the first place. That I'd confused the rows. That my memory of the layout wasn't as precise as I thought. That excuse held together for about 3 days. On Saturday night, I watched a bedroom set rearrange itself. I was standing at the end of row 4, doing my 9 o'clock walkthrough, when I heard a sound from deeper in the store. Not a crash. Not a scrape. It was more like the sound of something heavy being set down very gently, a soft, dense thud followed by a faint vibration in the floor. I walked toward it, slowly, my footsteps echoing off the concrete. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The rows of furniture stood around me like the walls of a canyon. I turned the corner into row 6 and saw the queen bed that had been in the middle of the row was now at the end of it, flush against the back wall. The nightstands that had been flanking it were positioned on either side, perfectly symmetrical. The dresser that went with the set was facing the bed from across the aisle, as if someone had arranged an entire bedroom in the middle of the store. While I was 50 feet away. In perfect silence. In under 10 seconds. My mouth went dry. My hands were shaking, and I shoved them into my pockets so I wouldn't have to look at them. I backed out of the row without turning around, and I went upstairs to the apartment and locked the door and did not come back down until morning. When I checked the next day, everything was back to normal. Every piece in its original position. As if nothing had happened. I called my uncle that afternoon. I didn't tell him what I'd seen, I knew how it would sound. Instead, I asked him about the building's history. He said it had been a farm supply warehouse, like I already knew, and before that it had been some kind of storage facility. He didn't know what it had stored. He said the company had leased it cheap because the owner was eager to get rid of it, and that was all there was to it. I asked him if any of the other locations had similar issues, furniture moving, strange sounds, anything unusual at night. There was a pause on the line that lasted just a beat too long before he said no. I should have quit. I know that. Anyone listening to this is probably screaming at me to leave. But you have to understand my situation. I had nowhere else to go. I had no savings, no other job prospects, and the apartment above the store was the only thing keeping me off the street. Leaving meant going back to sleeping in my car, and it was February in Ohio, and the cold would kill me slower than whatever was happening in that store, but it would kill me just as dead. So I stayed. I followed the rules. I stopped walking the floor after 9. I stayed near the front of the store or in the back office during the last hours of the night. And for a while, that was enough. Then the customers started coming. Not during the day. During the day, everything was normal, the same slow trickle of people, the same mundane transactions. It was at night. After 10. After the town had gone dark and the parking lot was empty and the road outside was a black ribbon of nothing. The first one came on a Tuesday. I was behind the register, reading, when the front door chimed. I looked up and saw a woman walking in. She was maybe 50, heavy-set, wearing a long coat and carrying a purse. She looked completely ordinary. She nodded at me and walked into the store without saying a word. I watched her disappear into the rows. I heard her footsteps on the concrete, steady and unhurried, moving deeper into the building. I waited for her to come back to the register with a question or a purchase. 10 minutes passed. 20. 30. At 11:15, I walked to the edge of the sales floor and called out. I said the store would be closing soon and asked if she needed help finding anything. My voice echoed through the rows and died somewhere in the back of the building. No one answered. I didn't go looking for her. The rule said not to confront late-night customers, and something in my gut, something older and more primitive than rational thought, told me to listen. I went to the back office. I waited until midnight. I walked to the front door, locked it, and set the alarm. I never saw the woman leave. But when I walked the floor the next morning, the store was empty. I checked the security cameras. The system was ancient, grainy, black and white, recording over itself every 72 hours. I found the footage from the night before and watched the woman enter the store. I watched her walk into row 2. And then, nothing. The cameras in the interior of the store didn't cover every angle, and she had walked into a blind spot. She never appeared on any other camera for the rest of the night. Not walking, not standing, not leaving. She simply walked into the store and ceased to exist. I checked the front door footage. The only person who opened that door after 9 p.m. was me, when I locked it at midnight. Over the following 2 weeks, it happened 4 more times. Different people each time. A tall man in a work jacket. A young woman with her hair pulled back. An older couple who entered together, holding hands. They all came in after 10. They all walked into the rows. None of them came back to the register. None of them appeared on the exit camera. And every morning, the store was empty. I started keeping a notebook. I wrote down the date, the time, what each person looked like, what they were wearing. I thought maybe I could find them, check if they were real people from the area, see if anyone had been reported missing. But Edgemoor was too small for a police station, and the nearest sheriff's office was 40 minutes away, and I had no evidence of a crime. People walked into a furniture store and didn't walk out. That's not a crime report. That's a riddle. It was Marcus who finally gave me something. He showed up one morning looking like he hadn't slept. I was making coffee in the break room, and he sat down across from me and said he was putting in his notice. I asked why. He said he'd been doing research on the building. Not the store, the building itself. He'd gone to the county records office and pulled the property history. The building had been a furniture warehouse before my uncle leased it. Before that, it was a storage facility for a regional moving company. And before that, going back to the 1970s, it had been a furniture showroom. A real one, not a liquidation outlet. A family-owned business called Hargrove and Sons. They sold high-end furniture, custom pieces, estate collections. They operated for almost 30 years. The business closed in 2003 after the owner, a man named Donald Hargrove, disappeared. According to the county records and a few archived articles Marcus had found online, Hargrove was last seen by his wife entering the showroom on a Sunday evening. She said he often went in after hours to rearrange the displays. He was particular about how the furniture was presented, almost obsessive about it. He'd spend hours moving pieces around, trying different configurations, as if searching for some perfect arrangement that only he could see. He walked into the building that Sunday night and never came out. His wife reported him missing Monday morning. The police searched the property and found nothing, no sign of a struggle, no indication that he'd left through any exit. His car was still in the parking lot. His keys were on the sales counter. He was simply gone. The business closed. The family sold the building. And every business that had occupied it since then had experienced some version of the same thing: employees quitting without notice, inventory being rearranged overnight, and, this was the part that made my stomach drop, occasional reports of people entering the building after dark and not being seen again. Marcus had printed out everything he'd found. He spread the pages across the break room table and pointed to a detail in one of the old articles. When the police searched the showroom after Hargrove's disappearance, they noted that the furniture on the sales floor had been arranged into what one officer described as a residential configuration, not a showroom layout, but a home layout. A bedroom in one corner. A living room in another. A kitchen arranged as if ready for a meal. As if someone had turned the showroom into a house. I thought about the bedroom set I'd seen rearranged that Saturday night. The bed against the wall. The nightstands flanking it. The dresser facing it from across the aisle. A bedroom. Marcus left that Friday. He shook my hand in the parking lot and told me to get out while I could. I said I would. I was lying. I didn't know I was lying at the time, but I was. The next week, Patty retired. She said it was her time, that she'd been thinking about it for months, and I believe that was true. But I also believe that the timing was not a coincidence. 2 days later, Dale simply stopped showing up. My uncle called him and got a disconnected number. Just like Terrence. Just like everyone who had worked in that building long enough. Suddenly I was the only employee. My uncle said he was working on hiring replacements, but weeks passed and no one came. The store stayed open. The deliveries still arrived. The customers still trickled in during the day. And at night, after 10, the other visitors still came. I started to notice a pattern. The furniture always moved into the same configurations: a bedroom, a living room, a dining area, a kitchen. The same 4 rooms, rearranged in different locations on the sales floor, but always recognizable. And the late-night visitors always walked toward whichever room had been set up that night. The tall man in the work jacket had walked toward the living room arrangement. The young woman had walked toward the kitchen. The older couple had walked toward the bedroom. They were going home. That thought arrived in my mind fully formed, and the moment it did, I felt a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. They were walking into rooms assembled from the broken and discarded furniture of other people's lives, and they were going somewhere. Not dying. Not disappearing. Going. To whatever place those rooms led to. Whatever place Donald Hargrove had built, or found, or opened when he spent all those late nights rearranging furniture with the desperate precision of a man trying to solve a puzzle that would drive him mad. I started watching the arrangements more carefully. Each night, the furniture would configure itself into a different combination, a different house, in effect. No 2 nights were the same. The couch would be different. The table would be different. But the structure was always there. 4 rooms. Always 4 rooms. And if I looked at them from a certain angle, if I let my eyes go slightly unfocused the way you do when you're looking at one of those old stereogram images, the spaces between the furniture seemed to shimmer. Not with light. With depth. As if the air inside those arrangements was thicker than the air outside them, as if the space itself was folded in a way that shouldn't be possible in a building with a flat concrete floor and a corrugated metal ceiling. I never stepped inside the arrangements. I want to be very clear about that. Northwest matter how close I got, no matter how much the rational part of my brain screamed at me to just walk through and prove that it was nothing, just furniture, just dead objects on a cold floor, I never crossed the threshold. Because I could feel it. Standing at the edge of one of those configurations was like standing at the edge of a cliff. Not the fear of height. The pull. The subtle, almost seductive whisper of gravity saying step forward, it's so easy, there's nothing to be afraid of, just one step and you'll see. And I knew, the way you know things in your body before your mind catches up, that if I stepped in, I wouldn't step back out. 3 months in, I was running the entire store alone. I opened at 10, worked the register, received deliveries, stocked the floor, cleaned, and closed at midnight. My uncle stopped calling. When I called him, he answered, but he was distant, evasive. He said the store was profitable and that was what mattered. He said the night procedures were in place for a reason and as long as I followed them, everything would be fine. He said this with the tone of a man reciting something he'd been told, not something he believed. I asked him how long Edgemore Furniture Liquidation had been in operation. He said 7 years. I asked how many night managers there had been before me. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he'd have to check the records and hung up. He never called back with an answer. By April, something had changed. The arrangements were getting larger. What had once been 4 distinct rooms assembled from a handful of pieces was now spreading across the sales floor like a house unfolding itself. One night I came downstairs at 10 to check the front door and found that nearly every piece of furniture on the floor had been moved. They weren't in rows anymore. They were in rooms. Walls of bookshelves and wardrobes created corridors. Dining tables and chairs formed a kitchen that opened into a living room made of sectional sofas and end tables and floor lamps that I swear were plugged into nothing but were glowing anyway, casting a warm amber light that the fluorescence above couldn't account for. I stood at the edge of the staircase and looked out at what had been a sales floor and was now a home. A fully realized, impossibly detailed home built from the discarded furniture of 100 different households, and it was beautiful. That's the thing no one warns you about. It was beautiful. The arrangement was perfect. Every piece fit exactly where it was, as if it had always been there, as if this was the configuration the furniture had been waiting for. The damaged pieces didn't look damaged anymore. The torn couch looked loved. The dented refrigerator looked like it held someone's leftovers. The dining table with the missing chair had only 3 place settings, as if the family that lived there had always been a family of 3. And deep inside the house, past the kitchen, past the living room, past the hallway made of armoires and tall cabinets, I could see a bedroom. The bedroom. A queen bed against the far wall, nightstands on either side, a dresser facing it. And sitting on the edge of the bed, in the amber glow of a lamp that had no right to be lit, was a man. He was sitting very still, facing the dresser, and I could see him only from behind. He had gray hair, thinning at the crown, and he was wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He was arranging something on the nightstand, adjusting it by millimeters. A picture frame, I thought, though I was too far away to be certain. He moved it slightly to the left, then slightly back to the right, then to the left again. Over and over, with the focused, mechanical patience of someone who would never be satisfied, who would keep adjusting forever because perfection was always 1 millimeter away. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I watched him for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. He never turned around. He never acknowledged me. But I felt, with absolute certainty, that he knew I was there. That he had always known I was there. That every arrangement, every configuration, every piece of furniture moved in the dead of night had been a message, a demonstration, an invitation. Come in. Sit down. Stay. I backed up the staircase. I locked the apartment door. I pushed the dresser against it. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and I waited until morning. When I finally went back downstairs at 7 a.m., the sales floor was normal. Every piece of furniture was back in its retail row. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The concrete floor was just a floor. There was no house. There was no man. There was no amber light. But on the front counter, where I always left my keys, there was a picture frame. A small, cheap wooden frame with a stock photo still inside it, the kind that comes in the frame when you buy it, a smiling family of 4 at a beach. It was from our inventory. The price tag was still on the back. $3.99. It had been placed at a very precise angle. I need to tell you about the last night. I've put it off long enough, and I can feel the resistance in my own chest even now, the way your body flinches away from a hot surface. But you deserve to know, and more importantly, I need to say it out loud so that it becomes real, so that it stays fixed in the world of things that actually happened and doesn't drift into the fog of things I might have dreamed. It was a Thursday in late April. The weather had turned warm, and there had been more daytime customers than usual, people gearing up for spring, looking for patio furniture and outdoor tables. I'd been on my feet for 14 hours by the time 10 o'clock rolled around, and I was exhausted in a way that made the edges of everything soft and slightly unreal. I should have gone upstairs. I should have followed my own rules, the ones I'd developed over 3 months of careful survival. After 9, go upstairs, lock the door, don't look at the sales floor. But I was behind on inventory. A shipment had come in that afternoon that I hadn't finished logging, and if I didn't do it tonight, the system would flag it and my uncle, or whoever was monitoring the system, would notice. So I stayed on the sales floor. I set up my laptop on the front counter and started entering item numbers, telling myself I'd be done by 11, that the arrangements didn't usually start until after 11, that I had time. At 10:15, the front door chimed. I looked up and saw a boy. He was young, 8, maybe 9 years old. He was wearing a green jacket and jeans and sneakers that were too big for him, and he had the specific kind of messiness that children have when no one has told them to comb their hair or tuck in their shirt. He walked into the store with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going. I called out to him. I said, "Hey, buddy, are you lost? Is someone with you?" He didn't answer. He didn't look at me. He walked past the counter and into the rows. Every rule, every instinct, every lesson I had learned in that building told me to let him go. To stay at the counter. To announce the closing time and retreat to the back office. The late-night visitors were not customers. They were not people who needed help. They were going somewhere I could not follow, and interfering with that process was, I felt this in my bones, dangerous in a way that went beyond anything I could articulate. But he was a child. He was a little boy walking alone into the dark guts of a building that swallowed people whole, and I could not, in any version of myself that I recognized, let him go. I followed him. The fluorescent lights above seemed dimmer than usual, or maybe that was my exhaustion blurring everything. I walked into row 1 and looked down the aisle. Empty. I turned into row 2. Empty. Row 3. Empty. I moved faster, my footsteps loud against the concrete, and I called out again, "Hello, hey, where are you going? Hold on," and my voice bounced off the furniture and came back to me distorted, stretched, as if the store was bigger than it should have been. I found him in row 7. He was standing at the edge of an arrangement, a living room, this time, with a large sectional sofa and a coffee table and a rug that I didn't recognize from our inventory, a thick braided rug in a pattern that looked handmade. The lamp on the end table was glowing. The amber light again. Warm and inviting and fundamentally wrong. The boy was standing at the threshold, looking in, and I could see his face for the first time. He looked calm. Not scared, not confused, not lost. Calm, in the way that water is calm before a current pulls you under. I said, "Wait. Please wait." He turned and looked at me. His eyes were brown and ordinary, and there was nothing supernatural about them. He looked exactly like what he appeared to be, a child who had found a door that was open and had decided to walk through it. He said something. One word, very quietly. I think it was home. And then he stepped into the arrangement. I lunged forward. I don't know what I intended to do, grab him, pull him back, throw myself between him and whatever was on the other side of that threshold. But the moment my hand crossed the boundary of the arrangement, the moment my fingers passed the invisible line between the sales floor and the living room, the world changed. It wasn't gradual. It was instantaneous, like flipping a switch. The fluorescent lights above were gone. The concrete floor was gone. I was standing in a hallway, a real hallway, with hardwood floors and wallpapered walls and framed pictures that I couldn't quite focus on, as if my eyes kept sliding off them. The air smelled like something cooking. Onions, maybe. Butter. Something domestic and ordinary that made my heart ache with a homesickness so powerful it nearly buckled my knees. The hallway stretched ahead of me. Doors on either side, all closed. At the far end, a staircase going up. The light was amber, coming from nowhere specific, and the silence was the kind of silence that isn't really silence at all. It was the silence of a house that's listening to you, that's aware of your presence the way a sleeping animal is aware of a hand reaching toward it. The boy was gone. The hallway was empty. But I could hear something from behind one of the doors, a faint, rhythmic sound. Scraping. Moving. The sound of something being adjusted, repositioned, nudged into place. And then a voice, very low, almost subliminal, saying no, not quite, not yet, not yet. I pulled my hand back. The hallway vanished. The sales floor returned. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The concrete was cold under my feet. I was standing in row 7 with my arm extended into empty air, and the arrangement in front of me was just furniture again, a couch, a coffee table, an unlit lamp. The rug was gone. The amber light was gone. The boy was gone. I ran. Not walked, not jogged, ran. I ran to the front of the store and I grabbed my keys and I went out the front door and I stood in the parking lot in the warm April night and I breathed and I breathed and I breathed. The sky above me was full of stars. The road was empty. A dog barked somewhere far away. The world was real and ordinary, and it did not have hallways that smelled like onions or lamps that lit themselves or men sitting on beds adjusting picture frames for eternity. I went back inside long enough to get my things from the apartment. I packed my bag in 4 minutes. I didn't look at the sales floor. I didn't walk past the staircase. I went straight to the apartment, shoved everything I owned into a duffel bag, and left through the back door by the loading dock. I got in my car and I drove. I drove for 6 hours. I ended up at a truck stop near the Pennsylvania border, sitting in a booth with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands, and I called my uncle. It was 4 in the morning. He answered on the second ring, which told me he'd been awake. I told him I was done. I told him I was never going back. I told him what I'd seen, all of it, everything, the furniture and the visitors and the hallway and the boy. He was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat and careful, the voice of a man walking across ice. He said he knew. He said they all knew, him, the regional managers, the property company. They'd known since the second year. The building did something to furniture. It used the pieces, the damaged, discarded, abandoned pieces of other people's homes, and it built something with them. Something that was always being refined, always being rearranged, always reaching toward a configuration that it hadn't achieved yet. And the people who came in at night, the ones who walked into the arrangements and didn't come back, they were part of it. They were filling the rooms, populating the house. I asked him what it was. What was in there? What Hargrove had found or built or become. He said he didn't know. He said no one knew. He said the store stayed open because the building needed new furniture. It consumed it, not physically, not in any way that showed up on an inventory report, but the pieces that went into the arrangements were changed afterward. Lighter. Duller. As if something had been taken from them. And the building needed fresh inventory to keep building, keep arranging, keep searching for whatever configuration it was trying to achieve. The store was a supply line. The liquidation model was perfect for it, a constant stream of new, unwanted, slightly broken furniture. Exactly what the building wanted. I asked him about the boy. He said he didn't want to talk about the boy. I hung up. I finished my coffee. I drove another 3 hours and stopped at a motel and slept for 16 hours straight. When I woke up, I had 11 missed calls from my uncle and a single text message that said, "Did you lock the front door when you left?" I hadn't. In my panic, I'd left through the back, and I'd never gone back to lock the front door. The front door of a building that, according to rule number 11, should never be found open. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone. I checked out of the motel and drove south, putting as much distance between myself and Edgemoor as I could. I spent 2 weeks moving from town to town, staying in cheap motels and applying for jobs and trying to rebuild something that felt like a normal life. I didn't think about the store. I forced myself not to think about it, the way you force yourself not to look at a wound. But then I started noticing things. Small things, at first. The lamp on the nightstand in one motel room was angled differently when I came back from the bathroom. A chair in a diner had been pulled out from the table as if someone had just stood up. The furniture in my new apartment, a studio I rented in a small town in West Virginia, never seemed to be exactly where I'd left it. A couch cushion rotated a few degrees. A bookshelf shifted half an inch from the wall. The kitchen table moved so slightly that I couldn't be sure it had moved at all. I started marking positions. I put tape on the floor around the legs of every piece of furniture I owned. I checked the tape every morning. For 3 days, nothing. On the 4th day, the tape around the left rear leg of my kitchen table was broken. The leg had moved 1/4 of an inch to the east. I'm writing this from that apartment. It's late, almost midnight. The lamp on my desk is the only light, and it's giving off a warm amber glow that I don't remember it having when I bought it. The apartment is quiet. The building is quiet. But beneath the silence, so faint I might be imagining it, there's a hum. A low, almost subliminal vibration in the floor, in the walls, in the bones of the building. The furniture is listening. I can feel it arranging itself when I'm not looking, slowly, patiently, millimeter by millimeter, the way a man on the edge of a bed adjusts a picture frame that will never be quite right. It's building something. It's always building something. And I don't know what happens when it finishes, but I know that the door it's making won't just lead somewhere. It'll lead here. If you're hearing this and you live near Edgemoor, Ohio, don't go into that store after dark. Don't go into any furniture store after dark. And if you wake up one morning and the chair by your bed has moved, even a little, even so slightly that you almost convince yourself you imagined it, don't adjust it. Don't touch it. Don't try to put it back. Because the moment you start rearranging, you become part of the pattern. And the pattern doesn't end. It's been building itself for decades, in every piece of furniture that's ever been discarded and resold and placed in a new home by hands that didn't know what they were carrying. I keep checking the tape on the floor. Every morning. Every night. The marks keep breaking. The apartment is getting smaller. Not the walls. Not the ceiling. The furniture. It's closing in. Slowly. Carefully. Arranging itself into something I'm starting to recognize. 4 rooms. It's almost finished.